The knife sliced through my birthday cake with surgical precision, and I couldn't help but think it was the perfect metaphor for how this dinner was about to go. Make a wish, sweetheart. Mom's voice carried that performative cheerfulness she reserved for public moments. The restaurant was packed, all eyes on our table as the Crawford family put on their weekly show of togetherness. My name is Olive, and at 28, I should have been past caring about birthday wishes. But sitting there, surrounded by my picture perfect family, I found myself wishing for something I'd wanted my entire life to matter. What did you wish for? Gemma leaned forward, her perfectly contoured face glowing in the candlelight. My older sister had that effortless beauty that made waiters stumble and strangers turn their heads. Everything about her screamed success, from her designer dress to the way she commanded attention without even trying. If I tell you, it won't come true, I said, forcing a smile. Dad raised his wine glass. To Olive, our little surprise package. The table erupted in polite laughter. I'd heard that phrase my entire life, their little surprise package, and it never failed to make my stomach clench. Code for, we weren't planning on you, but here you are anyway. Speaking of surprises, Gemma reached into her purse, pulling out a small wrapped box. I got you something special this year. My heart did a stupid little flutter. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe she'd actually put thought into. It's a DNA test. She announced it like she'd just revealed the cure for cancer. You know, one of those ancestry things. I thought it might finally explain why you're so different from the rest of us. The restaurant noise faded to a dull hum. Different. There it was, wrapped up in a pretty bow with a side of public humiliation. Gemma! Mom laughed, but her eyes held a warning. That's not very nice. Oh, come on, it's funny. Maybe we'll find out Olive's part Viking or something. That would explain the stubbornness, right? Gemma's laugh tinkled like wind chimes, and other diners smiled in our direction, charmed by her apparent wit. Dad chuckled. Well, it would be interesting to see what we're working with genetically. Your mother's side has some gaps in the family tree. I stared at the box in my hands. The weight of it felt heavier than it should have. Around me, my family continued their casual dissection of my existence, each comment landing like a paper cut. I think it's thoughtful, I said finally, my voice steady despite the fire building in my chest. Thank you, Gemma. See? Olive gets it. She knows I'm just teasing. Gemma reached over and squeezed my hand, her grip just a little too tight. We love you exactly as you are, weird little sister. The waiter appeared with dessert menus, and the conversation shifted to Gemma's latest promotion at the marketing firm. I sat there, nodding at appropriate intervals, while my family discussed her corner office and the client she'd just landed. When they asked about my job at the nonprofit, Dad's expression went politely blank. That's nice, honey. Still saving the world one grant application at a time? Something like that. Mom patted my arm. It's wonderful that you're so passionate about helping people, even if it doesn't pay much. Even if. Those two words summed up my entire relationship with my family. Even if you're not successful like Gemma, even if you don't make us proud, even if you're not what we wanted. The dinner dragged on for another hour. Gemma regaled us with stories about her weekend in the Hamptons with Morgan, her best friend since college. Mom and Dad hung on every word, laughing at her jokes, asking follow up questions. When I mentioned my volunteer work at the animal shelter, the conversation lasted exactly 37 seconds before pivoting back to Gemma's social calendar. By the time we said our goodbyes in the parking lot, my cheeks hurt from fake smiling. Gemma hugged me tight, whispering in my ear, Don't take anything I said personally. You know I love you. But her eyes said something else entirely. They said, Know your place. I drove home to my studio apartment, the DNA kit sitting on my passenger seat like evidence of a crime. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Lovely dinner. So glad we could celebrate you properly. Properly? Right. I spat in that little tube that night, swearing to myself that if there was some cosmic reason I was so different from them, I'd find it. And maybe, just maybe, I'd finally get the last laugh. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was halfway through my second cup of coffee and a spreadsheet that made my eyes cross. Subject Urgent. Additional information required regarding your recent DNA analysis. I almost deleted it. Spam filters weren't perfect, and I'd gotten my fair share of "you've won the Nigerian lottery" emails, but something about the formal letterhead made me pause. This was from the actual DNA company, not some knockoff. Dear Ms. Crawford, our laboratory has identified genetic markers in your sample that require immediate verification. Please contact our specialized genealogy department at your earliest convenience. This matter is time sensitive and confidential. Sincerely, Dr. Patricia Williams, Senior Genealogist. I stared at the screen. Genetic markers? What the hell did that even mean? My phone rang before I could Google it. Olive? It was Tyrese, my cousin from dad's side. We weren't super close, but he was one of the few family members who didn't make me feel like a walking disappointment. You busy? Just drowning in grant applications. What's up? This is gonna sound weird, but have you talked to anyone in the family lately? Like, about anything? Unusual? I leaned back in my chair. Define unusual. Gemma's engagement party planning has reached psychotic levels, if that counts. No, I mean, he paused. Look, I was at your parents' house yesterday helping your dad with his computer, and I heard your name come up. A lot. They were whispering about something, and when I walked into the room, they went dead silent. My stomach dropped. What kind of whispering? The kind that means someone's in trouble or about to be. Your mom looked like she'd seen a ghost. I glanced back at the email on my screen. Tyrese, did they mention anything about DNA or genealogy? Or how did you know that? The coffee suddenly tasted like ash. Lucky guess. Olive, what's going on? Your dad asked me if I knew whether you'd been digging around in family history lately. I told him no, but he seemed really rattled. I screenshot the email and sent it to him. Check your phone. The line went quiet for a long moment. Holy shit. You actually did the DNA test Gemma got you? Yeah, and now I'm getting cryptic emails about genetic markers. What do you think it means? I think it means you should call that number. Like, right now. After we hung up, I stared at the email for another 10 minutes before dialing. A receptionist with a soothing voice transferred me to Dr. Williams, who sounded like she'd been waiting for my call. Miss Crawford, thank you for contacting us so promptly. I need to ask you some questions about your family history. Is there. Okay, shoot. Are you aware of any adoption in your immediate family? Any questions about parentage? My heart started hammering. No. Why would you ask that? Your genetic profile indicates some inconsistencies with typical family inheritance patterns. Nothing alarming from a health perspective, but it's raised some flags in our genealogy database. What kind of flags? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details over the phone, but I need to ask, do you have a family attorney? Someone who handles estate matters? The question hit me like a slap. Why would I need a lawyer? Miss Crawford, I strongly recommend you contact your family's legal representative immediately. There are certain protocols we must follow when genetic testing reveals information that could impact inheritance or estate matters. My hands were shaking now. Are you saying I'm not related to my family? I'm saying you need to speak with an attorney. Today, if possible. I've already sent a preliminary report to our legal department, and they'll be reaching out to relevant parties within 48 hours. The line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, my mind racing. Inheritance? State matters? What the hell had Gemma's stupid joke gift unleashed? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Paul Rose, Crawford family attorney. We need to meet urgently. Can you come to my office this afternoon? I'd heard Paul's name my entire life. He'd handled my grandparents' estates, helped dad with business contracts, been the family's go to legal guy for decades, but he'd never contacted me directly. Ever. I typed back, "How did you get my number?" The DNA company contacted me an hour ago. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. Can you be here at 3 p.m.? My hands were full on trembling now. What kind of situation? The kind that changes everything. Don't tell your family about this meeting. Not yet. I stared at that last message until the words blurred together. Don't tell my family. The same family who'd been whispering about me behind closed doors. Whatever was in my DNA, whatever those genetic markers meant, it was big enough to make a lawyer I'd never met tell me to keep secrets from the people who raised me. I texted back, I'll be there. Paul's office smelled like leather and old money. Floor to ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with legal tomes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The man himself looked exactly like central casting would order for family lawyer, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of handshake that meant business. Olive, thank you for coming on such short notice. He gestured to a chair across from his massive mahogany desk. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? I'm good. Can you just tell me what's going on? Because I'm about 2 seconds away from having a panic attack. Paul settled into his chair and opened a thick file folder. How much do you know about your grandmother Eleanor's estate? Grandma Eleanor? I blinked. She died when I was 12. I know she left everything to Dad and his siblings. That's what everyone believed, yes. Paul pulled out a document that looked older than me. But Eleanor was, let's say she was more strategic than anyone realized. He slid the paper across the desk. The letterhead read, Last Will and Testament of Eleanor May Crawford, but the date was different from what I remembered. This is a codicil, an amendment to her original will. She filed it 6 months before her death, but with very specific instructions. It could only be executed when certain genetic criteria were met. Genetic criteria? Eleanor suspected there were questions about her family line, specifically about which of her descendants carried her true bloodline. Paul's fingers drummed against the desk. She set up a trust that could only be accessed by someone who could prove direct genetic descent from her maternal line. My mouth went dry. And? Your DNA test results were automatically cross referenced with our genealogy database. You match those genetic markers perfectly, Olive. Your sister does not. The room tilted sideways. What are you saying? I'm saying Eleanor left a substantial trust, separate from the main estate, that belongs to you and you alone. The DNA verification was the key she'd been waiting for. I gripped the arms of my chair. How substantial? Paul consulted another document. $12.7 million, plus a portfolio of investments that's grown considerably over the past 16 years. Current total value is approximately 18 million. The words hit me like a physical blow. 18 million? The trust includes property holdings, stock options, and a rather impressive art collection. Eleanor was apparently much wealthier than anyone knew, and she was very careful about where that wealth would go. But why me? Why not Dad? Or because you're the only one who carries the genetic markers she was looking for, the only one who can prove direct descent from her mother's line. Paul leaned forward. Olive, there's something else. Something that's going to be difficult to hear. My heart was already racing, but somehow it found another gear. What? The genetic testing also revealed some inconsistencies in your immediate family's DNA patterns, patterns that suggest Gemma may not share the same biological father as you. The room went completely silent except for the ticking of an antique clock on the mantel. Are you telling me Gemma isn't my full sister? I'm telling you what the science shows, and I'm telling you that Eleanor suspected as much. She built safeguards into this trust to ensure it went to her true bloodline. I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. The city stretched out below, but I couldn't focus on anything. Does my family know about this trust? Not yet, but I'm legally obligated to inform them within 72 hours of genetic verification. That's why I needed to meet with you first. They're going to lose their minds. Probably. Paul's voice was matter of fact. The main estate they inherited 16 years ago was substantial, but nothing compared to what Eleanor kept hidden. She was protecting this money for someone she knew would need it. I turned back to face him. Someone she knew would need it? Eleanor left a letter, for you specifically. He handed me an envelope with my name written in shaky handwriting. She wrote it the day before she died. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was short, written on cream colored stationery. My dearest Olive, if you're reading this, then my suspicions were correct, and you've proven what I always knew. You are my true legacy. I've watched how they treat you, child. I've seen the way they make you small to make themselves feel big. This money isn't just an inheritance, it's your freedom. Use it wisely, but don't let them take it from you. You owe them nothing. You were always my favorite, even when I couldn't say so. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. I read it twice before the words fully sank in. She knew. She knew how they treated me. Eleanor was sharper than anyone gave her credit for. She saw things others missed. When do you have to tell them? Paul checked his watch. I'll be calling your parents tomorrow morning to schedule a family meeting. All of you need to be present when I explain the situation. All of us. Yes, including Gemma. Paul's expression was sympathetic but firm. Olive, I need you to understand something. Once this information comes out, your family dynamics are going to change forever. There's no going back. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my purse. $18 million. Freedom, revenge served on a silver platter. Mr. Paul? Yes? Schedule that meeting. The conference room felt like a courtroom. Mom sat ramrod straight in her chair. Dad drummed his fingers against the table, and Gemma kept checking her phone like she had somewhere more important to be. This better be good, Paul, Dad said. I had to reschedule 3 meetings for this. And I'm supposed to be at a brunch with Morgan in an hour, Gemma added, not looking up from her screen. Can we speed this along? I sat at the far end of the table, Grandma Eleanor's letter burning a hole in my purse. Paul had positioned himself at the head of the table with his files spread out like battle plans. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. What I'm about to share will significantly impact your family, so I need everyone's full attention. Gemma finally put her phone down. Is this about taxes? Because I already told you I don't want to be involved in Dad's business stuff. It's about Eleanor's estate. Mom perked up. Mother's estate? But that was settled years ago. The portion you knew about was settled. There was another component that required specific conditions to be met before it could be executed. Dad leaned forward. What kind of conditions? Paul opened the first file. Eleanor established a secondary trust that could only be accessed through genetic verification. She suspected there were questions about bloodlines within the family. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Bloodlines? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. She required DNA testing to prove direct maternal descent from her line. Last week, those conditions were finally met. Gemma laughed, but it sounded forced. Let me guess. Olive's weird DNA test triggered something. What did she win? A family tree certificate? Paul's expression didn't change. She won $18 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's face went white. Mom's mouth fell open. Gemma's phone clattered to the table. 18 million? Dad's voice cracked. That's impossible. Eleanor was far wealthier than any of you realized. She kept this trust completely separate from her main estate, with instructions that it could only go to someone who could prove they carried her true genetic legacy. And that's Olive? Mom's voice was getting higher. Our Olive? Your Olive is the sole beneficiary. Yes, the DNA testing confirmed she carries the specific genetic markers Eleanor was looking for. Gemma shot to her feet. This is insane. There has to be some mistake. Run the test again. The test has been verified multiple times. The results are conclusive. But I'm the oldest. Gemma's composure was cracking. I'm the one who takes care of everything. I'm the responsible one. Paul consulted another document. The genetic testing also revealed some additional information about family relationships that Eleanor suspected. Dad's knuckles were white where he gripped the table. What kind of information? The DNA analysis indicates that while Olive is a full genetic match for both parents, Gemma shares genetic markers with only one parent. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. What the hell does that mean? Gemma's voice was shrill now. Mom made a sound like she was choking. Dad stared at the table like it held the secrets of the universe. It means, Paul said gently, that Gemma and Olive are half sisters, not full sisters. No. Gemma shook her head violently. No, that's not possible. Tell them, Mom. Tell them this is crazy. All eyes turned to Mom, whose face had gone from white to gray. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Evelyn? Dad's voice was deadly quiet. I I can't. This isn't. Mom's hands were shaking. Mom! Gemma slammed her palm on the table. Say something. The trust is ironclad, Paul continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. Eleanor anticipated there might be challenges to the inheritance. She built in multiple safeguards. Dad finally looked up, his eyes finding mine for the first time since we'd sat down. Did you know about any of this? I found out yesterday. And you didn't think to give us a heads up? Gemma whirled on me. You just sat there and let us walk into this ambush? Like you gave me a heads up when you humiliated me at my birthday dinner? That was a joke. This is $18 million. Dollars. Exactly. I stood up slowly. This is $18 million dollars that Grandma Eleanor specifically left to me, not to the family, to me. But you'll share it, right? Mom's voice was pleading now. You'll do the right thing? I looked around the table at their faces, desperate, angry, calculating, the same faces that had dismissed me, belittled me, made me feel like I was never enough. Why would I do that? Because we're family, Gemma's voice cracked. Are we? Because for the past 28 years, you've all made it pretty clear that I don't really belong. Dad cleared his throat. Olive, I think you're being a bit dramatic. Am I? When's the last time any of you asked about my life? My job? My dreams? When's the last time you treated me like I mattered? The room fell silent again. The money is legally yours, Paul said quietly. You have no obligation to share it. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. Then I won't. Olive, wait, Mom called after me. I turned back one last time. You know what the funny thing is? Gemma was right. That DNA test did explain why I'm so different from the rest of you. I walked out, leaving them to pick up the pieces of their shattered assumptions. The penthouse had floor to ceiling windows and a view that made my old studio apartment look like a closet. I'd signed the lease that morning, paid 6 months upfront in cash, and had my meager belongings moved in by noon. Money, it turned out, made everything move faster. My phone had been buzzing nonstop for 3 days. 17 missed calls from Mom, 12 from Dad, and 43 from Gemma. I'd blocked them all. The doorman called up around 2. Ms. Olive, there's a woman here claiming to be your sister. Should I send her up? Which sister? I asked, though I already knew. Blonde, very insistent. Tell her I'm not home. She says she'll wait. Then she'll be waiting a long time. 20 minutes later, my phone rang from an unknown number. Don't hang up. It was Gemma, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. We need to talk. No, we don't. I'm standing outside your building. I know you're up there. I walked to the window and looked down. Sure enough, there was Gemma on the sidewalk, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Nice view from the penthouse, she said. Must be nice to buy your way out of family problems. It is, actually. Olive, this is insane. You can't just disappear and pretend we don't exist. Watch me. What about Mom? She's been crying for 3 days straight. She can barely get out of bed. Maybe she should have thought about that before she had an affair. The line went quiet for a long moment. She told us about about my father. I sank into my new leather couch. And? It was a mistake. A one-time thing when she and Dad were separated for those few months. She never meant for it to happen. But it did happen. And you're the result. That doesn't change anything between us. Doesn't it? Because you've spent your entire life lording your golden child status over me, and now we find out you're not even Dad's biological daughter. I'm still your sister, half sister, and barely that considering how you've treated me. Gemma's voice cracked. I know I wasn't always nice to you, but nice? Gemma, you've spent 28 years making me feel like I was a mistake, like I was the family disappointment. Every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering, you made sure I knew I didn't measure up. I was protecting myself. Do you know what it's like being the oldest, having all that pressure to be perfect? Do you know what it's like being the youngest and never being good enough? I hung up and turned my phone off. The next morning, I had a meeting at the bank to set up my investment accounts. The wealth manager, a sharp woman named Patricia, walked me through my options with the kind of deference I'd never experienced before. Given the size of your portfolio, we recommend diversifying across several sectors, she said, sliding documents across the polished table. Real estate, tech stocks, some international bonds. What about pulling investments from specific companies? Of course, do you have particular holdings you'd like to divest from? I pulled out a list I'd prepared. All of these. I want them liquidated immediately. Patricia's eyebrows rose as she scanned the paper. These are all companies your family has significant stakes in, your father's business partners, your sister's firm's biggest clients. I know exactly what they are. This will cause some disruption in their operations. That's the point. By Thursday, the ripple effects had started. Dad's construction company lost its biggest investor. Gemma's marketing firm lost three major accounts when their funding dried up. Mom's charity board position became awkward when their largest donor, me through Eleanor's foundation, suddenly went silent. My phone started ringing again. New numbers, desperate voices. Olive, please. Dad's voice was hoarse. You're destroying everything we've built. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just choosing where my money goes. Your money? That's family money. No, Dad, it's my money. Grandma Eleanor made that very clear. Friday afternoon, I was reviewing real estate listings when the doorman called again. Ms. Olive, there's a Morgan here to see you. Says she's a friend? Morgan, Gemma's best friend and my longtime frenemy. This should be interesting. Send her up. Morgan looked exactly like she always did, perfectly styled, designer everything, the kind of woman who never had a hair out of place. But there was something different in her eyes, something calculating. Olive, look at you, living the high life. She glanced around my apartment with obvious envy. This place is incredible. What do you want, Morgan? Can't I just visit an old friend? We were never friends. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Come on, don't be like that. I always liked you. You tolerated me because I came with Gemma. Morgan settled onto my couch uninvited. Okay, fine. I'm here because Gemma's worried about you. We all are. How thoughtful. She's really struggling, Olive. The whole family is. Maybe you could, I don't know, throw them a bone? A little financial help? Why would I do that? Because they're your family. And because she leaned forward conspiratorially. Because people are starting to talk about the money, about Gemma's parentage, about your family's sudden financial troubles. The gossip mill is working overtime. I smiled. Is it? You don't want to be known as the sister who destroyed her own family, do you? Actually, Morgan, I think that's exactly what I want to be known as. Her perfectly composed mask slipped for just a moment. Olive, be smart about this. You win some, you lose some, but you don't burn bridges. What if I want to burn bridges? She stood up, smoothing her skirt. Then you're going to find yourself very alone. After she left, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood at my window, watching the city lights flicker to life. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyrese. Family dinner Sunday. Mom's begging everyone to come. Says she has something important to tell us all. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. I'll be there. Time to see what other secrets were about to come to light. The family dining room felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was because I'd gotten used to my penthouse, or maybe it was because the tension in the room was suffocating. Everyone sat in their usual spots except me. I'd chosen the chair farthest from the head of the table. Mom looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past week. Dark circles under her eyes, hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Dad kept clearing his throat like he was about to say something important, then falling silent. Gemma stared at her untouched plate like it held the answers to life's mysteries. Thank you for coming, Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know things have been difficult. Difficult? Gemma's laugh was bitter. Mom, Olive destroyed Dad's business partnerships in one afternoon. Difficult doesn't begin to cover it. I made some investment decisions, I said calmly. That's what people with money do. You made vindictive decisions, Dad snapped. You're punishing us for something that happened 30 years ago. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just choosing not to financially support people who've treated me like garbage my entire life. We never treated you like garbage, Mom's voice cracked. Really? Should I start listing examples? Because I have 28 years worth. Tyrese, who'd been silent until now, cleared his throat. Maybe we should focus on why we're all here. Mom nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Yes. Yes, you're right. She took a shaky breath. There's something else you all need to know about Eleanor, about the family. More secrets? Gemma's voice was flat. Great, just what we need. Your grandmother didn't just suspect things about bloodlines, Mom continued. She knew things about the family fortune, about how it was really built. Dad's face went pale. Evelyn, don't. They deserve to know, Charles, especially now. Know what? I leaned forward. Mom pulled out an old leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. This was Eleanor's. She left it for me with specific instructions to share it if the trust was ever activated. She opened it to a page marked with a ribbon. The original family fortune, the money that built Dad's business empire, that paid for our house, our lifestyle, it wasn't legitimately earned. What do you mean? Tyrese asked. Eleanor's father, your great grandfather, embezzled it. From the company he worked for, from business partners, from anyone he could steal from. When Eleanor found out, she was horrified. Gemma finally looked up. So what? That was like 100 years ago. 60 years ago. And Eleanor spent her entire life trying to make amends. The trust she set up for Olive, that money came from her secretly paying back the families her father had stolen from. She liquidated assets, sold properties, lived much more modestly than she could have. I stared at the journal. She was trying to right his wrongs. Exactly. And she wanted to make sure the clean money, the money she'd earned legitimately, went to someone who would use it responsibly, someone who understood what it meant to be overlooked, underestimated. Someone like me, I said quietly. Someone exactly like you. Dad slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. You're making Eleanor sound like some kind of saint when she was just a bitter old woman who played favorites. She wasn't bitter. Mom shot back. She was guilty, and she was trying to fix what her father broke by cutting out her own son, by making sure the dirty money stayed separate from the clean money. Charles, you inherited everything that came from legitimate sources. The construction business, the investments your father built himself, that's all yours. But Olive gets the real fortune, Gemma said bitterly. Olive gets the money Eleanor spent decades cleaning, money she earned through her own investments, her own work. I opened the journal and flipped through pages of Eleanor's careful handwriting. Lists of families, amounts owed, payments made, decades of meticulous record keeping. She tracked down every family her father had hurt, I said, reading her notes. Paid them back with interest. It took her 40 years. Mom nodded. She never told anyone what she was doing, just quietly made it right. And now you're telling us this. Why? Dad's voice was cold. Because Olive deserves to know that her inheritance isn't just money, it's justice. It's Eleanor's life work. I closed the journal and looked around the table. Is this supposed to make me feel guilty? Like I should share the money because it has some noble purpose? I'm telling you because you have a right to know the truth, Mom said. All of it. Well, here's another truth. I stood up, tucking the journal under my arm. Eleanor was right to keep the money separate. She was right to choose carefully who got it. And she was right about all of you. Olive, please, Mom started. No. You want to talk about justice? Let's talk about justice. You all benefited from stolen money for decades and never questioned it. You lived in houses and drove cars and sent Gemma to private school on money that was taken from other families. And when Eleanor tried to make it right, you called her bitter. I headed for the door. The money stays with me, all of it, because that's what Eleanor wanted, and frankly, it's what you all deserve. Where are you going? Tyrese called after me. To do some research. I want to know more about the families Eleanor helped. Maybe it's time to finish what she started. I paused at the doorway and looked back one last time. Oh, and Gemma, you might want to start job hunting. I heard your firm is losing more clients every day. The door slammed behind me with a satisfying thud. In my car, I opened Eleanor's journal again and found a page near the back with a list of names and addresses. Families who'd been hurt by my great grandfather's crimes. Some had been fully compensated, others only partially. Time to see what $18 million could really accomplish. The Children's Hospital Charity Gala was the kind of event where everyone who mattered showed up to see and be seen. Crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, and enough diamonds to blind a person. I'd bought a table for 10 and invited no one, leaving 9 empty chairs as my own private statement. I was sipping champagne and watching the auction when I spotted them across the room. Mom and Dad, dressed to the nines, working the crowd like nothing had changed. And there was Gemma, stunning in a red dress that probably cost more than most people's rent, laughing with a group of socialites. Olive! I turned to find Morgan approaching, her smile bright and predatory. I didn't expect to see you here, especially not sitting alone. I like the company. Right. She glanced at my empty table. Listen, I wanted to apologize for the other day. I was out of line. Were you? I was just trying to help. Gemma's really struggling, you know. The business is hemorrhaging clients, and the rumors about her parentage are spreading like wildfire. What rumors? Morgan's eyes gleamed. Oh, you haven't heard? People are saying she's not really a Crawford, that she's some kind of illegitimate child. It's all anyone's talking about. How terrible for her. The thing is, Morgan leaned closer. Some people are starting to ask questions about the whole family, about where the money really came from, about why you suddenly have so much of it. I set down my champagne. And what are people concluding? That maybe the Crawfords aren't as respectable as they pretended to be. Before I could respond, the lights dimmed and the auction began. I watched from my empty table as various items went up for bid: vacation packages, artwork, jewelry. Then the auctioneer announced something that made my blood freeze. Next up, we have a very special item donated by the Crawford family, a vintage necklace that's been in their family for generations. I knew that necklace. It had belonged to Eleanor. She'd worn it in every family photo, and I'd always assumed it would go to Mom or Gemma eventually. The bidding starts at $5,000. I raised my paddle. 10,000. Heads turned in my direction. Across the room, I saw Dad's face go white. We have 10,000. Do I hear 15? A woman in the front row raised her paddle. 20,000, I called out. The murmur of conversation grew louder. People were starting to stare. 25, the woman countered. 50,000. The room went silent. The auctioneer looked stunned. $50,000. Going once. 60. I turned to see Gemma striding toward the front of the room, her face flushed with anger. 75, I said calmly. 100,000. Gemma's voice cracked. The crowd was buzzing now. This wasn't just an auction anymore, it was a public spectacle. 150,000, I said, standing up. Gemma whirled around to face me across the room. You can't be serious. 200,000. Stop it! Gemma's composure finally shattered completely. That necklace belongs to our family. Which family would that be, Gemma? Because from what I hear, you're not actually a Crawford. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Gemma's face went from red to white in seconds. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth? The same truth you've been running from for weeks? I walked toward the front of the room, every eye following me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to share something with you. My sister here, my half sister actually, has spent her entire life pretending to be something she's not, the golden child of a respectable family. Olive, stop! Dad's voice cut through the crowd, but I ignored him. But the truth is, our family fortune was built on theft. My great grandfather was an embezzler who stole from dozens of families. And Gemma? Well, she's the product of an affair my mother had 30 years ago. The silence in the room was deafening. The necklace you're bidding on belonged to my grandmother Eleanor, who spent 40 years secretly paying back the families my great grandfather robbed. She left her real fortune to me, not because I was her favorite, but because she knew I'd continue her work. I pulled out a folder I'd prepared and handed it to the auctioneer. These are the records of every family Eleanor helped, every debt she paid, every wrong she tried to right. The money I inherited isn't dirty money, it's the cleanest money this family has ever seen. Gemma was shaking now. You're lying. You're making this up to humiliate me. Am I? Then explain why your DNA doesn't match Dad's. Explain why you're not mentioned in Eleanor's trust. Explain why your precious marketing firm is losing clients faster than you can count them. Because you're sabotaging me. I'm not sabotaging you, Gemma. I'm just not propping you up anymore. There's a difference. I turned back to the auctioneer. 200,000 for the necklace. Final offer. Sold! As I walked to the front to claim my purchase, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Behind me, I could hear Gemma sobbing and Mom trying to calm her down. Dad was nowhere to be seen. At the payment table, I wrote out the check with steady hands. The necklace felt heavier than I remembered when they placed it around my neck. Morgan appeared beside me as I headed for the exit. Well, that was quite a show. Was it? You realize you just destroyed your entire family in front of half the city's elite? I paused at the door and looked back at the chaos I'd left behind. Gemma was being comforted by strangers while Mom and Dad huddled together, looking lost and broken. Good, I said, and walked out into the night. My phone buzzed with a text as I waited for my car. You won, but are you happy? I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. The knock on my door came at 7 in the morning, 3 days after the gala. I'd been expecting it, honestly. The story had made the society pages, then the regular news, then social media. Eris exposes family secrets at charity auction was trending on Twitter. I opened the door to find Tyrese holding 2 cups of coffee and looking like he hadn't slept. "We need to talk," he said. "Come in." He handed me a coffee and settled onto my couch. "So, that was quite a performance the other night." "It wasn't a performance, it was the truth. The truth delivered with surgical precision to cause maximum damage." I sat across from him. "They had it coming." "Did they? All of them? What's that supposed to mean?" Tyrese pulled out his phone and showed me a news article. "Gemma's in the hospital. Panic attack, dehydration. She hasn't eaten in 3 days." I stared at the screen. "That's not my fault." "Isn't it?" "Olive, I get that you were angry. I get that they treated you badly, but what you did at that gala, that was nuclear." "So?" "So your mom called me yesterday. She's worried you're going to hurt yourself." "Hurt myself? I'm fine. I'm better than fine." "Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, you look miserable." I stood up and walked to the window. The city stretched out below, but it felt empty. Everything felt empty. They destroyed me for 28 years, Tyrese. Every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering, they made sure I knew I wasn't good enough. And now that I finally have the power to fight back, everyone wants me to be the bigger person. I'm not asking you to be the bigger person. I'm asking if this is what you really wanted. What do you mean? You've got the money. You've got the power. You've humiliated them publicly and destroyed their reputation. You won, Olive, so why do you look like you lost? I turned away from the window. "I don't know what you're talking about. When's the last time you talked to someone who wasn't a lawyer or a banker? When's the last time you laughed? When's the last time you did something that wasn't about revenge?" "I'm helping people. I'm finishing Eleanor's work, paying back the families that were hurt." "That's great. That's really great. But what about you? What about your life?" My phone rang before I could answer. Unknown number. "Hello? Olive, it's Mom." I almost hung up. "What do you want?" "I want to apologize. For everything. For the way we treated you. For the secrets. For not protecting you the way I should have. It's a little late for that." "I know. I know it is. But I need you to know that I'm proud of you. For standing up for yourself. For taking control of your life. Even if it meant destroying ours." I sank back onto the couch. "Mom, Gemma's getting help. Real help. Therapy, medication, the works. And your father and we're separating. We should have done it years ago. I'm sorry. Don't be. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. We made our choices, and you made yours. Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. Maybe I'll travel. Maybe I'll figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be the perfect wife and mother." We sat in silence for a moment. "Olive?" "Yeah?" "The money Eleanor left you. Use it well. But don't let it be the only thing that defines you." After she hung up, I stared at my phone for a long time. "Feel better?" Tyrese asked. "No." "Yes." "I don't know." "You know what Eleanor's journal said about the families she helped?" I looked at him. "What?" "I read it while you were getting coffee. She didn't just pay them back, she stayed in touch with them, helped their kids get into college, supported their businesses, became part of their lives. The money wasn't the end goal, it was the beginning." He stood up and headed for the door. "You've got $18 million and a chance to do something incredible with it. But first, you need to decide who you want to be, the person who destroys people or the person who builds them up. What if I don't know how to build people up?" "Then learn. You've got time, money, and a grandmother who left you a pretty good roadmap." After he left, I sat alone in my penthouse, surrounded by expensive furniture and silence. I picked up Eleanor's journal and flipped to the back where she'd written a final entry. "To whoever inherits this burden and this gift, money is power, but power without purpose is just noise. I hope you'll be wiser than I was, kinder than I was, and braver than I was. The world has enough people who tear things down. Be someone who builds things up." I closed the journal and picked up my phone. There were 17 missed calls from reporters, 43 text messages from numbers I didn't recognize, and one voicemail from the director of the children's hospital. I played the voicemail. Ms. Olive, this is Dr. Martinez from Children's Hospital. I wanted to thank you for your generous donation at the gala. But more than that, I wanted to ask if you'd be interested in joining our board. We could use someone with your perspective on our team. I saved the message and scrolled through Eleanor's list of families. Some had been fully compensated, others partially. A few had notes about children and grandchildren, dreams deferred, opportunities missed. I started making calls. Hello, is this Mrs. Patterson? This is Olive. I'm Eleanor's granddaughter, and I think it's time we finished what she started. By the end of the day, I'd made 12 calls, set up 6 meetings, and established a foundation in Eleanor's name. The penthouse still felt empty, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was moving towards something instead of just away from it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the news. Proud of you for fighting back. Hope you find peace. Morgan. I stared at the message, then typed back. Working on it. Outside my window, the city lights were coming on, each one representing a life, a story, a possibility. I had the power to change some of those stories now. The question was, what kind of change did I want to make? I picked up Eleanor's journal one more time and started reading from the beginning. Time to learn how to build something beautiful from the ashes of something broken.